Let's start with the very simple question of what does it mean to be a Zionist today? Who would like to begin? Because he will answer.
I'm happy to begin. So it's an interesting question, I think, with both a complex and a simple answer. And sort of for me, the defining moment or moments where I realized what Zionism was and the role it played in my life happened at a time that I don't even remember. It was in June of 1967. I was 1, my brother was 3, and war broke out in Israel, and my father, who was an ardent Zionist, booked himself a plane ticket to fight and volunteer for the IDF. Now, that afternoon, his brother canceled the ticket, said he was crazy, and my father rebooked it the next morning. His brother canceled it that afternoon, and this went on for 6 days, and by that time, the war was over, so he never actually went. But that story was legendary in our household, and then when I went for the first time at age 13 for my bar mitzvah, I remember distinctly standing on the Mount of Olives overlooking the old city of Jerusalem, and my father said to myself and my brother and sister, "This is Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people. I sincerely hope that you will one day develop a deep and meaningful relationship with the land and people of Israel and pass that along to your children." And that really has been my charge, both as a parent, but more importantly, as an educator. In the field of Israel education, we look at everything through an educational lens, and I would say our raison d'etre, our reason to exist, is at the very core, is that our hope is that every young person will develop a deep and meaningful relationship with both the land and the people of Israel, full stop. And if we're able to teach towards that or accomplish that, then, you know, Zionism, which may not be called Zionism by those who are being educated, that principle and that concept that was so near to me would continue. And one of our great, prophets at the iCenter is a fellow named Parker J. Palmer, a great American educationist, and he says, when you put on new lenses, you see things that would otherwise be invisible. And if we don't put on new lenses and see from the vantage point of our learners, then we will be unable to see what we actually need to see, and that is how they interact with and define their connection to Israel and what they choose to call it.
Hi. The house I grew up in Jerusalem was situated at the junction of 3 neighborhoods. The streets of the first neighborhood were named for the sons of the biblical patriarch Jacob, the founders of the tribes of Israel. The second neighborhood streets held the names of Israeli military units and operations and the pre-state resistance movements like the Palmach. And while walking the streets of the third neighborhood, one could encounter the sages of the Mishnah and the Talmud. So for me, this is the face of Zionism. 3 different groups of Jewish pioneers over the length of almost 40 centuries, all interested in building a culture and nature and national life in the promised land for the sons and the daughters of Israel. All obligate themselves to act upon their dreams, and all holding the faith that they can make a change in the life of their generations and generations to come. That their utopian hope can be a reality, that there can be no despair, no regret, no giving up. In the words of Ben Gurion, in the land of Israel, anyone who doesn't believe in miracles is not a realist. So 3 neighborhoods that holds fathers and mothers, patriarchs and matriarchs, fighters and thinkers. I think those are the 3 elements of Zionism: family, fathers and mothers, family, security, and ideas, tradition. For me, keeping those 3 alive is Zionism.
Dr. Rovin Schwartz.
So for me, my Zionism actually begins with my great-grandfather, whom I never met. A Jewish educator, a journalist, a scholar in the town of Kremenets in Ukraine. And he was the Eliezer ben Yehuda of his shtetl. His was the only house in which Hebrew was the language that was spoken in the home. This was in the early in the early 1900s, over 100 years ago. When he left after the pogroms, 1918, 1919 in Ukraine, he desperately hoped to come to Eretz Yisrael. He went to Denver, Colorado, because his brother and two sisters were there, and he wrote in his diary and said, "What does Denver, Colorado speak to my soul? I grew up with rolling off my tongue, Petach Tikva, Yerushalayim, Hebron, and here I am going to Denver, Colorado." He was a Jewish educator who ran a 6-day-a-week Ivrit B'Ivrit Talmud Torah, what we would see now as a Gar'in, a Zionist Gar'in. He ended up in New Orleans, and his dream of building a land in Eretz Yisrael, he came to see that that dream needs people all over the world to fulfill it. There are those who are enriching Jewish culture and Jewish life outside of Eretz Yisrael and working for its building, and some were chalutzim, privileged to go right then. So that is the core of my Zionism. It continues, thank God, 5 generations of Hebrew speakers, all in the United States, to my grandchildren. The second piece of my Zionism is my own training as a historian. We know how deeply embedded Zion is in the history of our people. We know that Jews, our ancestors, left corners of their room unpainted to remember that life was not full if they were not in Eretz Yisrael. And we know, of course, in our liturgy, in our poetry, in our song, Zion is paramount. You cannot go a day as a Jew without uttering that longing for Zion in all of our ritual. And then finally, the third pillar of my Zionism is that for 30 years, I've been working with students as an educator and now as chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. These are individuals who come with a deep longing to learn more, to understand the history of our people, to connect with our people, to do so in an open, critical manner, and to do so out of love. And they help me understand each 30 years now is a few generations of students. A generation of students is about 2 years. That's how quickly things change. And their Zionism evolves. And that is the way in which we learn from them the way that they will best relate out of love to the state of Israel.
We have a really short time, but I have to tell you one of the, I think, main principles of the Israeli identity is chutzpah. So I'll be chutzpanit, and I'll say that everything you said right now is very beautiful and even romantic, but how do you engage the young generation to, in an era of multiple identities, with Zionism? And we have 5 minutes for it, so.
The one thing I didn't want to say, I didn't want to preemptively say that my answer was interesting, but irrelevant. And it really is, because how I relate to Zionism is important to me. But how the people who are sitting in our classrooms and being taught sort of in experiential environments, the questions that they have are so important. And those are questions that we need to not only listen to, but we don't need to provide them with answers. We need to provide them with more questions. And, if this panel had been a little bit closer to home, I probably would have invited my daughter to come and sit with me on it, because her answer to the question of what makes you a Zionist, or what is it about Zionism that attracts you, I think is far more relevant than my own. My son doesn't really care about anything, so I wouldn't ask him. But I think the important thing that we need to really think about here is I was raised through indoctrination. And I say that lovingly to my parents and to all of my teachers, but I was given a steady diet of who I had to be and what my relationship needed to be. And that no longer holds true. And I think we need to have the difficult, challenging conversations. We need to make space for people and try to understand where they're coming from and help them to define a relationship that maybe they will refer to as being Zionist and maybe they won't. To me, it's what's beyond and behind that relationship that's important and not the terminology they use to name it.
A few years back, I took part in a meeting between lay leaders of the New York Jewish Federation and leaders from Israel. As a part of an interesting exercise, a triangle was drawn on the floor. It's 3 points holding different definitions for Jewish identity and belongings. The first point proclaimed the state of Israel as the strongest element of Jewish identity. The second held Jewish traditions and life cycle events, and the third noted the Tikkun Olam. We were first asked to place ourselves on the triangle according to our identities, the results of which were not so different among the Israelis and the Americans, with most of the attendees placing themselves in mostly centrist positions in between the 3 points. Then we were asked to stand where we thought our children would have stood had they have been there with us. At this point, the differences became very clear. While the Israelis thought their children would make the same decisions as they had, almost all the Americans stood in the Tikkun Olam corner, and only a few thought that the children would consider the state of Israel or Jewish tradition as a dominant part of their Jewish identity. This is our challenge. And I think instead of regretting and criticizing this situation, we should learn it and take advantage of it. We should invite young Jews and millennials to center their passion for Tikkun Olam in Israel, in whatever field they hold their interest. We should also help them integrate their vision of Tikkun Olam into their own homelands. The motivation would be to create connection between their passion to activism to their Jewish heritage, to act not only as universalists, but simultaneously as Jewish activists, and rediscover Israel's story as the hopes of dreamers, activists, reformers seeking a better world, Tikkun Olam. When the creation of the world was completed, God demanded of Adam and Eve, according to the Midrash, to be aware not to destroy the beautiful world given to them, because there is no one to correct the wrongs and to pick up after them. Maybe the young Jews of the world can make these repairs and partake in God's work, making the world a better place as the Jewish mission of the 21st century.
Dr. Rouben Schwartz, maybe you can tell us, in your opinion, what are the key questions that should be raised today to modify the 21st century Zionism to the 21st century Jewish people?
The thing we need to really think about when we're talking with our young people is to help them develop a radical empathy. There is a radical empathy that must be developed between young people as they consider young people outside of Israel and those who are in Israel. Part of it is creating deeper relationships with those individuals. Part of it is really, it requires deep listening, because we need to understand where our young people are coming from. Peoplehood ideas ring very differently for them. They hear other things, but they are here in the tent. They are being critical because they care, because they love Israel, because some of the things that they learn, as they learn more deeply, pain them, as we all learn. When we learn critically and deeply, we learn the warts and all of one another. And it is that ability to love Israel with its shortcomings, just as we learn to love our own countries with their shortcomings, that can enable them, if we listen and hear that they're crying out of pain because of a lot of the things that pain us. about the ways in which Israel falls short of what we all hope it will become. And that is our challenge as educators, to keep them close, to help them confront these questions out of a sense of love, and to get them engaged in the process of, whether they call it tikkun olam, whatever it is that will help them work with the state of Israel to create a country that aspires to be the Jewish democratic state that we love and hold so dear.
This is a crucial discussion, but we are out of time, as it always is. Thank you so much.